Now, Mark Maxwell is just back in studio here today, with us. You just got back from the courthouse where St. Louis County Sheriff Alfred Montgomery is in the final arguments. Mark, you've been in there for every day, of this trial. Where do things stand today after closing arguments earlier today?
Well, if anyone just saw, I just put my mic on here. That's how quickly we just got back in. You're right, Holden. The city sheriff, Alfred Montgomery, is now waiting to hear from a judge. The closing arguments have wrapped. The lead prosecutor, Greg Goodwin, really did his homework. He came prepared into closing arguments today. He went through a PowerPoint slide presentation connecting all the evidence that we heard in court to the existing case law on this quo warranto for each of the 6 counts. They argued that Montgomery broke the law when he ordered jail official Tammy Ross detained, that he broke the law when he disarmed a former deputy at a gas station, when he refused medical transports from the City Justice Center, then when he used an on-duty sergeant to watch his kids. They allege he mismanaged finances and then became unable to serve while in federal custody at the end of it all. The state argued the evidence showed willful neglect, that Montgomery knew his duties and simply chose not to do them. The defense pushed back hard. They said nothing here justifies undoing an election where 91,000 voters weighed in. They called the state's case political, exaggerated, built on unreliable witnesses. They argued the sheriff was merely trying to fix a troubled office and doing what all the sheriffs before him had done for years. But what we know in this case, it's now in Judge Stephen Omer's hands. He didn't give us an exact timeline for when he might rule. He has the holiday break to sit with all this, go through it, and write his order out. He did stress this is urgent. Of course, Holden, as soon as we have any inkling of what that decision is, what it might be, of course, we will update the folks and let people know.
And real quick for you, Mark, how is this impacting just day-to-day operations with the sheriff's office? I know we have an interim sheriff right now.
It's a really good question. On 2 fronts, I'm going to point to witness testimony from Doug Burris, who was the interim jail commissioner when Sheriff Alfred Montgomery first came in. During Montgomery, Burris testified that when he refused to transport prisoners, that meant that inmates in the jail couldn't get a shower, couldn't get free time. Things got a lot more volatile and dangerous in the jail. Now that Sheriff John Hayden, the former city police chief, has stepped in and has resumed doing all those transportation, taking inmates to their hospital visits, their medical visits, things have calmed down a bit. So I think the state, and we didn't actually hear the state make this argument, but they could have made the case that under this new interim sheriff, things have gotten better quickly. There's also the financial issue, but the judge has a lot to weigh. 4 days of testimony, some of it quite vivid. And so I think a lot of people are waiting to see what things will look like as the sheriff. Of course, there's that federal criminal trial, and we saw the defense try to almost poke holes in that federal case in the state case too. So a preview of what's to come. Sheriff Montgomery's job's on the line right now, his liberty on the line later.
Could you see, the outcome of this trial impacting that federal case?
The outcome, I'm not so sure, but some of the evidence in the testimony argued yes. I gave one example on 5 Plus earlier this morning when we were previewing all this. Yesterday in court, a bizarre moment, Holden. The defense brought out these 3 flip phones, and they called them documentary evidence, demonstrable evidence. They put them on the judge's desk. They asked to say, hey, court clerk, call this number. They read the number aloud in court, and they said, let's see if one of these 3 phones rings. Now, why were they doing all that? You remember the federal case, prosecutors said that the sheriff went out of his way to get a quote-unquote burner phone. The defense didn't like that name. They said, well, people associate burner phones with the drug trade. They made the case that one of those 3 phones right there on the desk was the phone Montgomery allegedly used to call and intimidate witnesses with. They said it was a work-issued phone that he got that sheriffs sometimes use to make certain calls with, but still raised questions why he didn't give that contact information to the pretrial services officer who was monitoring his release, and why Montgomery seemed to have known, I can't get caught doing this, so I'm going to use a phone that doesn't trace back to me to make this call. And that's what the feds really nabbed him on. That's why he's in jail. And I'll say one last thing, Holden. The defense argued forcefully in closing arguments that Judge Mason really didn't like the image, the optics of the sheriff being shackled. And he said a lot of people in the viewing audience may not like that. He said maybe it makes for good TV here, but he really didn't like the statement that the federal prosecutors were trying to make by keeping the sheriff in chains in court.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I know you'll keep us updated both on air and online.
You bet. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.